Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Leading Innovation at Work, the new normal special edition. I am very excited about today's guest, Colette Temmink. Colette and I work on the same board with global board with IFMA. And, I've got to know Colette quite well over the last couple of years. And she is one of those people I am in awe of. And I always follow for leading trends in corporate real estate in our profession. Truly one of those really innovative pioneers and thought leaders in our industry. And I'm just so delighted to have you as a guest today, Colette. Thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you for the invite. And that was probably one of the best openings I've experienced. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. So Colette is the president of Property Services at Eden. And as I mentioned, a fellow global board member at IFMA. She's also on the Coronet faculty. And I mean, she is literally, like I said, the who's who in our industry. She's had a number of senior executive positions at a number of the top companies in our industry. I am really in awe of her accomplishments. And she's really one of those influencers that I pay attention to. So grateful to have her on the podcast today. We're really talking about, there's been so much change. We've been living in an experiment of the last 6 months. And many of you know that we just recently published a book. Barb and I just recently published a book on the new normal. And we're going around to different experts and asking them for their views and opinions around what we've learned in the last 6 months dealing with COVID and, living in this experiment. And what do we think is going to stick around, I think, through any major event, whether it be 9/11 or earthquakes or floods, any major disaster. While it's unfortunate, it also teaches us something and we become more resilient, and there's some sort of a lesson that comes out of this. So I'm really just trying to understand the lesson that we're supposed to learn out of this pandemic that we've been experiencing, all of us faced against the same sort of finger quote enemy over the last year. And it's really left an indelible mark on the way that we're working. So Colette, I'd love to hear a couple of thoughts of things that you think are going to stick around or what we're going to accelerate in our change going forward in the workplace.
Terrific. So maybe I'll just start from my lens, right? Really the property and the facilities management industry. So, and let me try to actually talk about three that are somewhat correlated, right? So if you think about where we work and how we work, and then how we're going to manage that space going forward. And then certainly that's going to have impacts to our industry and service providers. So let's just start with kind of where we're going to work, right? The physical space. And there's this reoccurring sentiment that we've been in the midst of this large global pilot for alternative working. But it's interesting, this work from home or alternative work has been around for decades. In fact, I remember when I worked at Sun Microsystems over a decade ago, and we actually had one of the largest alternative work programs compared to most companies. And in fact, this was the same decade, if you remember, where corporations started thinking about the utilization of their space, right? So if you had a dedicated office and you weren't in your office full time, you could give up your office and go to hoteling space, and the company could shrink their footprint or provide more amenities, and they would have a better cost structure to their real estate. And, thank goodness we've learned a lot since then. And, we've learned a lot about how people work and the need for different types of space, right? Like collaboration space, individual spaces, as well as this hoteling and unassigned space. So I think now we're recognizing that one size does not fit all. And we may not be productive in just one of those spaces, and we may also have a desire not to work in one of those spaces full time. So if you think about, the recent Colliers survey, I think you said you had Kate on earlier, she might have touched upon this, but really, 83% of people want at least the flexibility to work from home, one day a week and still come into the office. And of course that percentage may change globally. And everyone, may not have conducive space at home where they want to work full-time from home. So as an example, I may live in a studio and I may have roommates, and there may be no space to have true concentration. And my preference would be to drive just a few miles to a shared location instead of, an hour commute to my employer's office. And so I think this is going to bring this demand for co-location, not only to the suburbs, but I think this, competition for talent in the future is just going to push the boundaries even further towards kind of this concept of work from anywhere, right? You're going to have multiple locations, and that's going to continue to grow. And that's going to, provide opportunity and challenges for corporate departments. So if you think about departments like HR, right, how do they enhance their employee training programs, given the new skills that are going to need to be performed successfully in different locations? As an example, during this same Collier study they mentioned earlier, they found that, folks that were, did a Zoom meeting at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day felt, 10% more connected to their teams. Well, this type of information is going to create new scopes and disciplines and demands for HR and facilities departments, right? And training departments. How are they going to embrace this and help their employees be productive no matter where they work? And so I think this data collection that's going to be gathered from, when people work, where they work, how they work, how are they going to measure productivity, is just going to lead to these increases in, experience solutions around space. And Lorri, we've seen this shift to increase occupant experience, providing more services and amenities, and this hospitality focus really began long before COVID. And, I do think this consumerism, or the need for more choices, and in turn this flexibility, it's going to continue to grow post-COVID. And I think that's also going to impact space design, right? If you think about the combinations of space, how much, conference room space do you need, collaboration space, private offices, that combination is going to continue to flux. And that's going to be a challenge for corporate real estate departments. We've all seen the surveys where the CEOs are expecting to reduce the footprint. Well, if you increase the collaborative areas, it doesn't necessarily mean you may have the opportunity to reduce the footprint. And so this whole space planning, and the discipline around that is going to be an opportunity and really a challenge for these departments. So it's not going to be the historical, I have 100 employees and I need 100 seats, or I only have 100 seats, so you need to reserve when you come into the office, and hopefully there's a spot for you. I think employees are going to think about coming in, Tuesday through Thursday and Monday and Friday, maybe underutilized and empty. And this whole supply demand mapping for space will also include kind of the gig economy and the shared economy and this contingent workforce, right? So how is that going to impact how much space a company needs and when? So space planning for new employees is much different than kind of these temporary bow waves of teams coming together, for new products and new projects, or, Scrum teams, and, how are these individuals going to interact with their teams and when? And this can be unpredictable for a lot of reasons. So I think this complexity around space planning is going to continue to grow. And frankly, it just makes it ripe for technology, right? To provide new solutions and new software to really kind of help, service providers and corporations really plan around the space and provide the required flexibility that they're going to be seeking. So I think that's, what, in terms of really the work from anywhere concept that's coming at us. So how are we going to manage that space, right? What are some of the things that FM departments are going to be doing? And there's no question FM departments, they're going to need to deliver and manage a digitally forward portfolio that's, has increases in automation and data science that provides better business insights. I mean square footage insights, but really business insights. And you mentioned it, right? This is accelerating, and it's accelerating faster than we've ever seen before in our industry. And, if you give me a minute to digress, I'll just touch upon kind of this history of corporate facilities. It may be just a good example to show this acceleration, right? So if you think about like functional departments within a company, they could be at different stages of maturity, even at the same time. So if you think about procurement, which is really the buying of the materials, and you think about facility services, right? Really maintaining buildings, both of these are really old activities and they've been around for centuries. But corporate departments, or the profession of both of these, are actually relatively new. So both professions, as we recognize them today, really began in the 1970s. And if I'm sure some of us will remember, certainly this was before my career started, but in the 70s was a really tough time for business, right? If you remember the oil crisis, this was a decade that kind of led to this widespread economic and industrial challenges, and businesses found it really difficult to buy raw materials and just satisfy their customer requirements. And so these difficulties and these challenges led to this emergence of procurement as a standalone function to buy the materials within a company. And so prior to this period, procurement was perceived as kind of non-strategic role within the business. And at the same time, FM was mostly just janitorial and caretaking service within a company. And on a side note, I should also note that during this really tough time, this is when entrepreneurs really stepped up, and you saw companies like Apple and Microsoft and Oracle, and they were really born during this period. So, so just jumping to, the 80s, where procurement moved kind of into this service role, and they help with product quality and identifying vendors and partners. And FM was really focused on cost cutting, right? Which led to more outsourcing, like plumbing and some of the services. But that's when you started to see FM as a profession really start to grow, because you saw these organizations like the one we worked together on, like IFMA, right? The International Facilities Management Association, really began during that period. And then in the 90s, procurement and sourcing became more strategic, and they influenced the business, and you saw these supplier partnerships, and FM was really just beginning to add more services like space planning. And then, the 2000s really kind of helped usher in this new supplier relationship model. And it included collaboration and innovation. Suppliers became this integral part of the business success, especially as more firms kind of outsource key functions. And this also meant kind of the beginnings of this use of better data, and at the same time, FM started to add additional services to their outsourcing contracts. There were traditional kind of single and bundled contracts, but this started this integrated facilities management, or, IFM. And really, IFM just means that you're adding multiple services under one contract to one supplier. And the concept of, using existing data and better data started also becoming a theme in FM. And then you're probably starting to notice this real trend of FM trailing behind procurement, the progression of it, and as a corporate function. And now we're starting to see this acceleration of pre-COVID trends, and FM's really in a position to take a lead in really helping organizations be successful going forward. So if you think about, for example, trends such as technology, digital transformation, AI, robotics, 3D printing, they're all impacting companies in the make-buy decision. But you're also seeing discussions around, business continuity, supply chain resilience, and environmental, social, and governance, this ESG, kind of, agile procurement, and then this localization of suppliers from global or onshoring, which we're starting to, hear louder and louder within the sourcing and FM departments. And I think we're going to start seeing this concept of purposeful abandonment start to creep into our dialogue, both with FM and service providers. So all this means is that are the things that you're doing what you should be doing, like the services that you're providing and the clients that you're serving? And if you are doing them, are they efficient, profitable? Are they needed and necessary? And I think, with this change, many successful companies really think through their strategic objectives, such as new products, but they also think about the business risk. And I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue with companies and suppliers, recognizing the contract that we signed, but the world has changed. Are we working collectively together to make the right changes? You're really going to, I guess, find out who your friends are, but they need to work together, because a lot of those services may change and they may be different, or you may make a purposeful abandonment of some of the things that you were doing. And I think, this history of procurement departments really trying to push the risk to providers, I think they learned that this is a false sense of security since COVID. At the same time, FM departments were demanding more innovation from service providers. And, that tends to contradict each other, as you may know. Are providers being asked to manage risk or innovation or both? And can they do those efficiently? Because they're very different cultures. And I think, Lorri, your organization does this probably very well, right? They actually have individuals that are focused on both.
Yeah.
And they balance that, but that is rare. And I think there's a larger school of brighter minds, certainly that may say that's really hard for an organization, and it doesn't happen too often. And so I think when you think about innovation, and partnership and what's really going to be important in these strategic partner relationships, there's going to be a lot more, hopefully, working together between the suppliers and corporations on what they need to achieve to deliver that space, right? So if you think about the larger global IFM providers, they really only serve about 20% of the FM spend.
Yes.
Right. So facility services really dominated by small or regional vendors, right, who deliver locally. And, these larger providers don't self-perform all those services. I mean, there's over 100 services that can serve a building, and nor should they be self-performing all those. And so there is a lot of subcontracting to regional and local providers, and FM is highly reliant on the small business community. And according to McKinsey Consulting, small businesses make up over 80% of the share of real estate, leasing and rental and construction industry by GDP. It's an enormous impact on our industry, and they've been hit hard recently by COVID. They're also employ about half of the private sector employees, certainly in the US. And it's interesting, 52% of them are actually home-based. So many of them are family owned, many of them are local businesses. And it's interesting, I recently read this article where they suggested that survival skills in family owned businesses tended to be stronger than entrepreneurs, even in startups, right, who had investors or other people's money. And I didn't entirely agree with this. So I did a little research just to, understand some of the facts. And what I found was that a quarter of the family businesses survive past the 15-year mark. And then I compared this, and 75% of the, venture-backed startups failed, which left about a quarter. So roughly the same, and I could say firsthand, how strong these survival skills are. We think about small and mid-cap companies, and I'm a daughter of 2 immigrant entrepreneurs, and now I'm engaged in the startup community. This leaves me really, really excited about this area and the opportunity for these small firms to bring innovations to the FM post-COVID. So, this brings this interesting concept of risk and innovation and understanding your supply chain. It's not just the company that you've hired to source, but it's all of their subcontractors, right? How do you go deep into the tiers of the supply chain and really understand where the risk needs to be managed and where innovation can come from? And I think we're gonna look at our industry differently, and I think innovation is gonna come, in a broader set than what we've seen in the past, and that's just gonna accelerate some of the changes that we're gonna see in our industry. I guess so that kind of brings us to the industry impact, right? So I'm a believer in the client is right. So if you take that approach and you look at this kind of KPMG CEO outlook, they did this special edition, just recently, right? And they really noticed this kind of radical shift from the beginning of the year. And they started seeing trends like ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance factors, flexible working, and digital transformation have all accelerated. So CEOs are focused on these areas. And then you just couple that with the supply chain management trends of resilience and efficiency, diversity of small suppliers, and regional suppliers are going to become more important. And I'm hopeful that the broader supply chain insight will eventually enable smaller specialized vendors who provide this kind of niche solution at a really efficient price. And it's, all of this is coming together. They found that 80% of the leaders have seen some form of digital transformation just being accelerated in their business during the pandemic. So that is really going to challenge our industry to serve that. So I know this was long-winded, but just recapping, right? It's work from anywhere. It's FM departments are going to have to be more progressive and have a stronger influence on the company's bottom line, even more so than other support services. And our industry is going to align to the client needs. And we're going to start seeing ES and G and digital transformation, automation become part of the solution and how we serve our clients. So it's pretty exciting going forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, in fact, this time is a catalyst for change. You know, I smile when you say some of the supply chain items, because one of the things I was observing with interest is, of course, you know, we had a lot of constraints around PPE and different masks and things like that. One of the inspirations for the book was around actually a Boy Scout who started 3D printing some of the materials that were constrained. And I realized that technology-driven solutions are going to really slingshot forward, where it might have taken, you know, that 3 or 4 years. I eventually think our entire supply chain is going to be really disrupted by 3D printing. So to see a real live example during COVID was like a real wake-up call. It's like, oh wait, the future is here. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I loved what you said around the supply chain, Colette. And I'm on a board for an outsourcing association. And one of the things that I think has been an education for outsourcing, procurement professionals, sourcing professionals is, and I think we've been going through this transformation, but it's really reached a head over the last 6 months, is really making sure we, you know, realizing we can't cheapskate to greatness. And a lot of the things that we rely on in our supply chain, you can't commoditize. And unfortunately, the sourcing profession is financially rewarded by savings, and they don't stick around to get the, you know, they don't really have the same level of accountability for risk management and quality and longevity and innovation, which almost work in opposition. And sourcing has evolved into a way that was at risk of commoditizing different aspects of the supply chain and services. And I think now we're going to see a push towards a much more sophisticated approach to sourcing that will incorporate much better skills, equip those professionals with better skills to buy solutions and innovation and just different aspects. Instead of commoditizing based on price, I think it's time for that profession to really grow up and get much more sophisticated in the way that we're buying solutions instead of, you know, widgets, if you follow me. So that's
Absolutely.
one thing I think will be a real slingshot for change. But I want to go back to something you started to talk about. Oh my God, everything you just said was just check.
Quite a bit in one breath.
Like ahas, like aha after aha, as usual, Colette. You're just so incredible. I'd like to hear more about, obviously, a huge amount of change in the way that we're going to work going forward, and has significant implications to facilities management and how we manage our facilities, or what is the role of a facilities manager in the future. So if we have more remote employees, more people coming in to touch down 1 or 2 days a week versus hanging their hat there 5 days a week, or that mobile contingency of the workforce. I'd love to just hear your thoughts around what you feel is the role of a facilities manager in the future, what kind of skills they should start to build, awareness, etc. How do you think it will pivot and evolve in the future?
You know, it's interesting, you know, FM managers are really responsible for providing a safe work environment and maintaining the building, and also a productive and a healthy work environment. So, you know, I'm excited about providing a healthier work environment going forward. You know, a lot of things that we've learned in COVID, and maybe organizations already knew this, but we didn't know it, you know, across the industry, you know, HVAC and indoor air quality, you know, ventilation, all of these things are going to continue post-COVID, right? So if you think about the flu or other viruses, they're going to continue to have an impact on the workplace, right? And I think we've all worked in an environment where we've worked next to someone who came in sick, right? But I think parts of this kind of healthy surveillance and thermal monitoring and tracking and monitoring the building's health for the employees, that's going to continue. And I think, if you're not feeling well, you shouldn't come into the office. And I think we don't want to see this domino effect where the whole department gets sick and then the bottom line to the company is impacted. And I think FMs are going to they're going to have to manage this space to provide that healthy environment, but they're also going to have to do it cost effectively. So they're going to have pressure around, remote management and digital delivery and automation. We're one of the last industries to be disrupted, and we've been doing things the same way for quite some time. And we're going to have to do things very differently, and that's going to require a different skill set going forward. And how FMs transition to that, there's a difference between managing a physical building and providing services on site and managing it digitally remotely. And I think you're going to start to see our industry profession broaden, but I think that's good for the industry. And I think we're going to see more disciplines, like IT and others, come a lot closer to our delivery and help us, kind of deliver that future space. But just to my earlier point, I think a lot of this is going to be driven by making sure that you have robust space planning. And that's going to be a challenge we're going to have to overcome from an industry and get, and put solutions in place that are going to be very helpful and provide that predictive information that we're going to need, because that information is then going to feed into facilities management. So for example, if I know someone booked, a conference room for a meeting, I know that conference room needs to be ready, and I know it needs to be clean post that use. So it really drives the facility services that are being consumed within a building. And today we don't have a lot of that visibility. We may have sensors that give us some of that information, but I think we're going to need a lot more tools to have more information to make, buildings get a little more self-managed, and we manage it a lot more efficiently.
I think I agree with everything you said. I think that the technology will also allow for some personalization as well.
Yeah.
So once we've got the infrastructure in place, that will allow for to enable personal choices, whether that be where you work, how you work, etc. But other than space planning, what other technologies have you really excited right now, Colette, around how we will, what we will need in the future, or what do you think we will be smarter about leveraging in the future from a technology's perspective?
It's interesting. There's always this concept of, I can leave my house in the morning and I get in my car that's tech enabled, and I get to the office, but there's always this lack of connection to the office building, right? That consumerization that I talked about earlier. How do you provide that personal, consumable experience when people get to the office? It's about giving them the right space to enable them to work and providing them with the services and supplies to ensure that they're productive, right? All the way down to what is their taste in food, and will I have that ready at a facility for them? And it's going to require big data and a lot of information. And how do you make it more seamless, right? We go to a hotel and it's a great experience, and then we go to the office and the first thing they do is ask for your ID at the security desk. And are we going to start to see really that seamless delivery of technology enabling that great experience, right? It's going to be able to recognize you when you come into the office so you don't have to stop. It's going to enable your badge before you get there. And then it's going to understand the services that you're going to need, and the facilities department is going to deliver that based on that information. And I think we're going to see a lot more products in that area. And I also think you're going to start to see, disaggregation and more partnership with the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, right, as part of the overall chain in mitigating that risk. And I think a lot of that innovation is going to come from those startup companies. I mean, Lorri, you see probably more technology than most of us in the industry, right? And all of the new things that you're seeing coming out and helping. And for me, it's really interesting to see, because a lot of these companies, didn't inherently grow up in FM, and they're just trying to provide a solution, and they're bringing a new discipline in our industry, which I think is very, very healthy, right? Why have we been doing things the same way for so long when we can do it much more efficiently going forward? And these technology companies are thinking about ways to do things more so than we ever would. And it's pretty exciting. But I do think working together with these companies like you've done, I think that's going to add a lot of value to how we're managing the buildings going forward.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, services I've always tried to provide to that demographic of the industry is act as a translator and a safe sandbox, like a safe playpen, a place to practice, right? Yeah. And we do have clients that want to experiment and try things. You can find a place to do a pilot and give them some practice and feedback. And I sense we're just about to go into another boom of that. And it will be all of those things that really enable a very different way of working. So one of the things I would encourage our audience to do is experiment with a pilot. Try something. What harm can a pilot do? But try and be curious about some of these new technologies that will really take you forward. And there are some really remarkable prop tech companies that are popping up with really good concepts. But I loved what you said, Colette. They're generally not real estate experts. And you need somebody with deep real estate and context expertise to be able to work in concert with these technology companies to make sure that it's applied. So they do the design and coding and things like that. It's not just the technology, which is an enabler, it's the people and processes that really makes the magic happen. And so get curious about trying and just do a pilot with a couple of companies and try it out, but just go down the garden path of trying more of these organizations that will drive efficiencies. And, like any experiment, sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't, but when it does, it usually has a tremendous value to your organization, and it's going to continue to help you evolve forward.
Yeah, and a lot of this technology, have been tried and proven in other industries. So think about a digital twin, right? There are many industries that technology has improved and has shown great promise. And we're starting to see that now in the real estate industry. So all of the technology doesn't have to be completely new, but new to our industry. So.
Exactly. Or it just hasn't matured. I think to your point, there were a few things that were around, but really hadn't become mainstream yet that I think we might slingshot forward in progress and adoption because of necessity. And so just continue on that path. I want to ask you, I also want to ask you, what do you think? I always like, we know each other, and I'm sunny side up, and I think you are too. So it's been very challenging, but I always think I'm always searching for some lesson out of adversity. What do you think is the biggest lesson that we've learned as facilities managers or in real estate as a profession over the last 6 months?
You bring up a great point. So if you think about history, right, these terrible events, but they've always led to these great transformations. So you think about the bubonic plague in the 1300s, that gave us a modern employment contract. Cholera in the 1800s gave us urban parks and this kind of radically improved infrastructure. Even the Spanish flu gave us kind of a revolutionized healthcare. So I think COVID seems to be leaning towards, leaving us and providing us with this office transformation, the ability to really work from anywhere, and really this higher focus on ESG, right? Environment, social, and governance. And I think these shifts, both of those will continue post-COVID. And I think that will be the mark that we'll see going forward.
No, I think that's a huge area that I think is going to come into its time as well, and continue to proliferate and just go mainstream. And you talked about wellness and well-being. That is a concept that I think was, around the peripheral. We started to get into it with well buildings and employee experience. But I agree with you. I think that's also going to be slingshotted forward with mental health has come out as a big topic over the last 6 months, and employee well-being in mental, not just physical. But a lot of people sitting at home for 6 months, people have gained weight or haven't used that time to focus on their own wellness. So I think, as Rex Miller says, focus on that whole wellness. I think that there's going to be a completely different commitment to that on behalf of companies, again, wherever you work, and encouraging employees to indoctrinate that into their schedule wherever they work as well, and almost the extended environment beyond the building environment as well. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to your point, right, kind of these other trends as well beyond health is, I think landlords are going to play a part in that, right? The gym and the environment that they're providing the tenants. But I also think, as we continue to see this kind of co-location of flex and amenities, and, I think landlords are going to play in that area versus just subleasing to other providers. And I think that may become a core competency of theirs, right? If you think about how they're delivering space in the future, and if co-location is going to become a percentage of a corporate portfolio, that will become a core competency in their delivery. And I also, feel that society is resilient, and certainly developers fall within this category. And I think we're going to see the reuse of properties continue. We've all read the headlines, right? Malls transitioning to distribution centers or experience centers and office to residential. You've also seen kind of startup companies provide flex co-location similar to Airbnb, right? You can rent my living room as a co-location facility, or surplus commercial space, from another location. And I do think that, and you'll probably agree, right? We're going to see telemedicine and remote sales and services and kind of this management of online data. But if you think about, kind of to your point earlier, from my perspective, I increase my understanding of humanity's spirit to thrive, which has left this indelible mark on me. And I think we're gonna learn a lot over the next year. And I think the best and the brightest in this, working together and thriving and surviving is going to bring innovation at an accelerated rate. And people are going to work together to provide these healthier work environments and monitor, frankly, to even know and measure if it is a healthy environment, and where should companies be focused, right? Is it certain gym classes? Is it better nutrition? If there's only so many dollars that an organization can spend, where is it best spent? And do we have the data and the insights to understand that?
And all of this around solving the problem of employee productivity, which is highly personal and different depending on each human. We're all wired differently, introverts, extroverts, etc. But I think that is going to be, all of the arrows will be pointed around enabling productivity, and health is one of those elements, one of those enablers, right? As well as technology. I totally agree. Colette, I always find you so thoughtful, and I really thank you for, one of the things I really love with talking with you is around shedding paradigms and evolving into the next phase of whatever the new abnormal or the new normal is going to be. And I loved what you said about reinvention and sort of the Phoenix phenomena. And back in 2008, when we were going through such a tremendous economic crisis, many of the companies in our Fortune 50 were born in that time of adversity. And so I hope that there is a small startup or a small prop tech out there that is imagining the future and just fearlessly goes forward and becomes one of those big unicorns, 5 to 10 years from now. And so keep going, because through these difficult times are born great companies, and we learn things through adversity. And I think we are about to go through a major transformation. I think we were already heading on that path, but I think it's been sped up just out of necessity, economic necessity. We're tolerant for different types of risk. I think we're much more willing to adopt new things to evolve. So please contribute to that. Colette, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that? What would be the best way that if they want to continue the conversation with you directly, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they could just reach me on LinkedIn. I think most people on there. So happy to help in any way I can. I mean, similar to Lorri, I think we would like to see our industry progress, and we would like to be part of the solution. So happy to help in any way I can. And I can't thank you enough for the invite today. This has been fun.
Anytime we chat, I miss seeing you in person, my friend. I
Yeah.
know we will at some point tip a glass together, but uh, I really, I'm a great admirer of yours and your
Yeah,
perspective,
same.
and I thank you for leaving an indelible thumbprint on our industry. And I appreciate your advice. Please reach out to Colette directly if you haven't already. Connect with her on LinkedIn. She's a huge influencer in her industry, and I'm always paying attention to what she has to say. So these moments of discussion are really precious. Thank you so much for being a guest today, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the other side.